Oh, it feels like I got hit by a bus. It takes me a little time to recover from social events. We just finished the Manitoba Beekeepers Association convention, and I spent a lot of time, in that social setting. As the second day, well, I conducted some business at the AGM, so I was up speaking at that. But the second day, I chaired the day, and I involved myself with. I was involved. I didn't present, but I involved myself with presentation. So I was in front of people speaking, and which is basically the same thing as presenting, because you're. But at any rate, yeah. So we invited a guy, Ray Olivarez from Orlando, California, owner operator of Olivarez Honeybees, and just here's a guy that stands up in the front with presence, with experience, and absolutely blows my mind the amount of work and system and just how everything's put together is absolutely amazing. So he spoke on the Friday, and on the Saturday he asked me, well, what do you want to hear? What do you want me to talk about the second time? And I was like, I really would like to hear you speak about your honeybee operation and how you put everything together, and just some of the, bare bones basics, just, ground up, bottom up, all those details as you're putting that system together, as you're moving those programs forward. What are you doing, and what are you looking for? Your perspective on and thought process around all this as you're putting it together. And he says, well, I can speak for 4 hours like that. I said, perfect. So what we did is a lot of fun. He went up in front, and he's got a slideshow, so he just threw up a few slides of a few particular things, cell builders and his incubator and grafting and his mating yards and stuff like that. And as he was talking, he asked me to go to the side with the mic and just kind of direct him or steer him with the conversation to where he, as he was talking about his queens and the queen rearing, and just using me as to steer the ship on where I'd want to see the conversation going. So as he's talking about his queen rearing operation, and I have any questions, so this gave me an opportunity to talk to Ray Olivarez, to speak directly to him, to ask him pointed, direct questions on everything there was about the setup and the process he put towards queen rearing. So I'm standing there feeding with all these questions as we're going, and that hour went by. It was like 5 minutes. It was like, holy shit, we could be talking about this for 2 hours. But it was a lot of fun, and I hope the crowd enjoyed it also. Just the conversation, that's what we're after, you know what I mean? Like that conversation between beekeepers. That's what all the beekeepers typically come to these conventions for, is, the speakers are up in front, and I always figure the speakers are kind of the catalyst to the conversation, which the beekeepers have back at their tables. And the reason the beekeepers come is not necessarily for the speaker, but to hear that conversation, have that conversation around the table or out in the halls or whatever. And I just felt like that second presentation of Ray's, to me anyways, it felt like I was at that table talking to him, talking bare bones basics, operational stuff, applied work. It was a hell of a lot of fun. And then at the end, all through the convention, I was writing down questions from the speakers, and I sat the three of them up there. Frank Rinkevich from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He spoke on toxicology and all this kind of stuff. Very academic, right? Scientific minded and brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But he can take that brilliance and convey it to someone like me, very applied in nature, And then we also invited up Hannah Neal from the Saskatchewan Tech Transfer Team, and someone who has a lot of experience with applied research and applied nature and working with beekeepers. And then we put Ray up there as being like a the beekeeper there has the operational and business experience. And so all through the convention, I was writing down questions, and just I was up there and I was just tossing them questions throughout that last hour of the convention, and that was a really good way of wrapping the event up. And I hope, and there again, I was hoping to bring that feel of that conversation and that feel of feedback, and something that you don't get from presentation is, as you're sitting there in the audience, you got those questions, you're too scared to ask the questions, or you have these thoughts, and elaborate on that thought, right? You can't ask them to do that through the presentation because it just doesn't work. There's not enough time. But to have a function like that speakers panel, and just have them elaborate on a few thoughts, just brings context to the whole event, and just brings that conversation to the crowd, and they really enjoyed that. So that was a lot of fun. But that all in itself put me in front of people speaking, and that takes a lot out of me. It wears me down. Like, I'm on high level, just crank that up, because you got to perform, you got to be up there, you got to get this job done, make it work. And it worked really well. It's just afterwards, debrief, I tell you, it takes a little bit for my system to recover from situations like that. But I'm learning to love, when I go around to these conventions speaking, or these meetings speaking, and then the same at this convention where I helped organize, it's the meal after. It's so fun. It's one of my most favorite things about these bee meetings now. Going out, meeting beekeepers, talking about beekeepers, one thing, but that meal after the convention, the organizers typically get all the speakers together, and we did the same thing here with ours. And the speakers are done speaking, so they're kind of like on ease now. They're on debrief. So we bring them together, sit them at the table, and just kind of have a few beers, as we unravel and have a meal. And conversation is just absolutely brilliant. Just the connection, And here I am sitting with both Sandy and I. We're sitting with Tammy and Olivarez. Dr. Rob Currie, he's the head entomologist at the University of Manitoba. Frank Rinkevich, he's the researcher at Baton Rouge in Louisiana. Daryl Wright, our MBA secretary. Rheal Lafreniere, our provincial apiarist. Brad Hogg is another director that helped put on the convention. And Sandy and I are sitting here. And these guys, as they talk and as they unwind a little bit, they just start talking about our industry, about their interests. And their interest is bees and all the work they're doing around bees and all these nuances they're talking about. And they're speaking a different language, and I had no idea what they're talking about. And I'm sitting there listening to this conversation thinking, wow, a guy like me, a beekeeper like me that's not exposed to this hardly at all, sitting here listening to it, the pure brilliance, the dedication, and the obsessive nature towards their passion, which is honeybees. And this energy is being, their energy, this conversation is directly towards the honeybee industry, our industry, to our benefit. And it's a terrific thing. And you get a guy like Olivarez sitting there that's obviously has been part of these conversations for a long time, and just sitting there like a sponge, listening to this, is quite overwhelming. And by the end of the night, I'm like a wet sponge. You can't take any more in. And it's one of my favorite parts. And the conversation comes back around off that scientific nature to more general, war stories, I guess, for lack of a better term, beekeeping, where I can kind of inject a little bit more business management, hive management, just, life in general. Talking to these guys, formed a little bit of a relationship. This is networking. You know what this means? I've gained to appreciate that this is one of the most important things about these conventions, is to provide this feedback to the membership. But more important, well, not more importantly, but at the same time, it's getting these guys together and talking. You know, guys get there, they've listened to the research through the presentations, they're talking to the beekeepers, they're sitting at that table, and you know, building a relationship between each other, networking. That networking is the important part. It's just an amazing thing. So, so being part of the Manitoba Beekeepers Association and being part of the planning, being invited out to all these conventions and these meetings, and being you know, being influenced, being right there at the table, has brought a understanding to this industry like I've never had before. Just behind the scenes, all this work that's going on is quite exciting, and it makes you feel really good about the industry, and it drives a little bit of motivation and passion in just saying, yes, you know, drive that wedge, move forward, you know, apply this research, and you know, just wants to get me beekeeping again. So I come back from the meeting, walk into my shed, and there's a lot of bee drop on the floor, so I'm gonna have to go in there and sweep. But just walking down the aisle and just look at my babies again, and those bees are ready to go. There, I can't wait. You know, this weather, it's not going to take 3 weeks. I'm going to have these bees out, hopefully, and we'll be back at her. So anyway, just a little bit of reflection on the last couple of days, and yeah, I'm sure enjoying myself.